Hey guys, welcome back to The Deep. This week I have a very special guest with me from our iHeartRadio family. It is Rick. And Rick, how are you doing tonight, buddy?
So far, so good. I can't complain, just trying to stay sane through all the events 2020 is bringing us, and giving me lots of opportunity to catch up on watching Disney Plus, actually. So I'm glad we get to do this.
I know, right? So good that Disney was nice enough to foresee COVID-19 and be able to drop Disney Plus on us, a couple months before it happened. That was fantastic.
Right.
We appreciate them for all that they do. So when we first started this show, you reached out to me on Facebook and was like, dude, if you are going to do this movie, I'm your guy. And so I came back to you about this movie, and the movie you picked was...
The Shaggy Dog, 1959, starring Fred MacMurray and...
Tommy Kirk. Tommy Kirk is in this one.
Tommy Kirk, thank you.
But the funny thing to me is, like, I had to go and say, okay, wait a minute. Do you mean the new Shaggy Dog, or are you talking about the original? And you're like, no way, man. It's the original.
The original is what I grew up on, and it was one of those movies that, when you're a kid, you like attach yourself to a movie and you just watch it over and over and over again. The Shaggy Dog was one of them for me. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory was another. Spaceballs was the third. So it kind of just tells you everything you need to know about me, honestly.
You are summed up in three movies, and
right.
I don't doubt that those three movies define who you are. That is fantastic. No, and I see you rocking the Star Wars shirt. That was a lot of my youth was Star Wars. So. But when it came to Disney, there were a lot of these like family movies that I think that they kind of would replay on the Wonderful World of Disney, or they might bring them back for a limited engagement, and you'd go and you'd watch them. I think that the thing that stands out for me is going back and watching a black and white film. Doing Deep in the Plus, I usually go deep into the Disney catalog, but I usually don't go this far back, and this is actually one of the farthest back we've gone. But it's still, a solid movie, even if it's in black and white, and I have to explain to my kids why it's not in color.
Yeah, it was before everything was actually in color in the world. So
right.
When they made the switch over in the 60s, something like that, that's when everything colorized. Actually, this is what I found interesting about this. I did a little research on it because, you grow up with a movie, the plot essentially is the Shaggy Dog, kid gets transmorgified into it and all that stuff. But I learned that this was actually Disney's first live action comedy.
Really?
But they did, yeah. This was Disney's first live action comedy, and it seemed to go well for them, clearly.
Well, and you know what? This is one of those things that is, to me, one of the kind of like the key series for Disney. They kind of come back to it every now and again, kind of like Freaky Friday, or The Love Bug. This is one of those that's kind of a franchise for them, and so it's interesting to me. That it's just kind of stood the test of time, and I don't know if it's the dog thing or the kind of the whole dream of transforming into a dog.
I think there was a lot of it. What I realized on the rewatch because I did a rewatch of it before we did this as well.
Yeah.
I noticed a lot of it kind of felt like it was the quintessential 50s family, nuclear family drama or comedy. It was. Mm-hmm. The paternal father who was very knowing, very assertive. It was the two wacky kids. It was the mom who stayed at home, cooked dinner and all that stuff, was in charge of the household. It was very much a slice of this time period in America, or at least what they project what that idea is anyway.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And the whole story is basically that Wilby is a very inventive, curious kid. He's a teenager. He finds himself in a museum. He knocks over some jewelry. One of the things that falls over is a ring that he gets in the cuff of his pants, which I can't remember the last time I cuffed my pants, so obviously a little bit older. He finds it. He starts to read the incantation that's in Latin because, of course, he's taken first year Latin. He reads the incantation.
Yes,
yeah, exactly. He reads the incantation, and he turns into a dog. Now, I am all for suspension of disbelief. I am absolutely 100%, and I use the example of Superman all the time. If you explain to me why the mechanics of Superman flying are a thing, I'll buy it. That's right, a man can fly. I'm totally into it. But I don't know that I follow that in this, because he turns into the dog, and the dog disappears when he turns into it. And then he is walking around as a dog, but he can talk. And then when he turns back out of the dog, he's got his clothes on. But there's a scene where he goes home and he gets in his pajamas as the dog and goes to bed. So I'm thinking, is he wearing clothes on top of clothes at that point? And I mean, it's just, and then the dog will then reappear magically somewhere randomly. And then also there's not like a, and I know I'm going off about this, and I would love to get your input on this because I'm sure you can shore all this up for me, is that it's not like a werewolf where it's when the moon is full or something like that, and he's not wearing the ring the whole time, so the incantation is still happening. I don't understand the rules.
Well, I think, well, first of all, what I also know is this is kind of like the first Disney hex movie that came out. Like you said, like they did a whole genre of these, the Freaky Fridays, all that stuff, this thing that the protagonist has to overcome in order to get rid of this hex. Yeah. And I kind of just felt like the hex was just whatever the plot needed it to be at any given time, because it's about, you know, the dog. I can't pronounce the name of the dog. It's like
Shafu or
Shafoon, yeah, something like that. It's you know, it's the legend of the Borgia family who dabbled in dark magic, so all that's unpredictable. I think that's really what it comes down to. This is really one of those movies that I don't think you need to really like drill down into too deeply to find a problem with, but it definitely it's. I think if you just go with the hex works when it works, that's the movie.
And it works when it's the worst possible time for it to happen. That's when it works. So, you know, kind of, again, the Incredible Hulk, sort of, he gets excited and he turns into the Incredible Hulk. This will be in, like, he's too happy maybe, and it happens at the worst time, whether he is at the dance or somewhere else. It's just, he turns into the dog, and it's kind of crazy. So I mean, I enjoy it, but again, that was one of those things that probably as a kid I didn't care about when I was watching with the family, but now I'm like, and then again, I have to explain to my kids, like, why does this make sense? Because in 2020 rules, it's a little flimsy. So let me go back to the beginning for one little thing that happened. So the opening credits is this sort of stop-action animation shag rug of a dog jumping around. What I find interesting about that is it's sort of budget, you know, with something that is a Disney movie, but at the same time, it was probably ahead of its time for what it was. But I saw in the credits that X Entencio, who was an Imagineer, a very famous Imagineer, wrote the, like, Yo-Ho, Yo-Ho, A Pirate's Life for Me, worked on a lot of those projects in the parks. It was the guy kind of responsible for the opening credit, and now I'm all of a sudden okay with it. Is that weird?
No, I mean, because honestly, you have to put yourself back into that time frame of what movies were able to do, what they were doing with it. And I really feel like that stop motion animation, that was ahead of its time. I mean, 20 years later, you had stuff like Gumby and other types of, like, you know, PBS shows that would use the same style to do entire shows, but they're doing this in 1959.
Yeah, true.
It just goes to show, like, these were really innovators the entire time they were making these movies.
Oh, absolutely. And whether I'm watching the Imagineering story and seeing how these guys transition from the movies into the theme parks, or seeing, like, you know, what they were able to accomplish early on, they were just pioneers in every way, shape, and form. So let's go back to the cast. We talked about Fred MacMurray. Fred MacMurray, I feel like, was sort of the Disney it guy for the 50s.
Well, apparently he was the highest paid actor at the time of this movie in Hollywood. So he was the it guy just in Hollywood in general with everything that he was doing.
Well, and that would make sense. But Absent-Minded Professor, the original Flubber, he was in that. You know, he was in Happiest Millionaire, I believe. And so he was in a lot of these Disney movies. So I was kind of trying to track this through time. So I feel like, and you tell me if you agree, that Frederick Murray is kind of the it guy for the 50s for Disney. I feel like Kurt Russell was kind of that in the 60s. And I feel like Dean Jones was kind of that in the 70s with, like, the Herbie movies, and actually the reprise of the Wilby character in the Shaggy DA.
Right.
I don't know who it was in the 80s, but I'm going to go ahead and do a hot take that I think that in the 90s it was Tim Allen. Fight me.
I think that was a little early for Tim Allen. I think Tim really broke out for Disney in the later half of the 90s, especially between the Santa Claus, Toy Story, his other stuff, which kind of happened more, I think, towards the later in mid 2000s, in my thought.
Jungle to Jungle.
Jungle to Jungle. That's a good one. That is a good reference right there. Yeah.
And I'm gonna say maybe in the current day and age, we're kind of fighting between whether it's going to be The Rock or Josh Gad as the it guy for Disney. So I think that's still to be determined for the 2020s, but maybe not. I don't know. I was thinking about that. So he was in this. Tommy Kirk was in this, who was in a lot of Disney things, and Kevin Corcoran, who was Moochie in this, who was Wilby's little brother, and he went by Moochie, and I thought, oh, that's weird, Moochie, and then went back and realized that he was Moochie on the Mickey Mouse Club, and then he was, so I think it makes sense that he was Moochie in this. Maybe that's the only thing he would, kind of like respond to or something, but he was also in Pollyanna, so it was a lot of the same kind of actors over and over again in these movies.
Well, he was actually a better child actor than most, I felt like. I mean, you still have the kind of the awkwardness that comes along with any child actor, but he was very enthusiastic. He clearly was having fun with the role. You know, talking about, he always wanted a dog, and now his brother is a dog, and he's so happy. He's,
Dad.
Yeah, all that stuff. So I think that's fun. One of the actresses that I thought was really awesome to see in this was Annette Funicello.
Oh yeah,
one of the original Mouseketeers, who went on to have a big career with Disney.
Yeah, and you know what? I always associate her with Disney, but I think a lot of those those beach movies are what kind of like made her later on. But I think of her as a Mouseketeer, and again, Kevin Corcoran was a Mouseketeer at some point too. So it's really interesting that they would be in this movie. But I do think that in a lot of these movies, Walt Disney or Walt Disney Studios were comfortable with going back to the same actors over and over again because they'd used them before and they worked. So why change the formula maybe? But Annette being in there was definitely, I was trying to explain to my teenage daughter who Annette was, and she, I think, was struggling a little bit to actually like have some reference. But I know
Show her Back to the Beach. That'll explain everything.
Okay, I will make a note to do that one.
Yeah.
I think I don't know if you're a huge fan of the Disney parks, but I think in Muppet Vision that there is a net full of Jell-O in the Muppet Vision queue, which is gone at Disneyland, but it still exists in Disney World if you want to come out this way. But it's again, she was a big important part of Disney history, I think. So let me ask you this then. When the movie comes to an end, we don't know what's happened to the hex. Like, there's no sign to us that the hex is over. He has not done anything to end the hex, and obviously that comes back to affect him a decade later in the sequel. Right. But is it weird that they don't shore up like that he's just going to stop turning into the dog? You know what? I never really thought about it. I always kind of figured that he did get rid of the hex because he was a hero at the end of the movie. Like, that's what Professor Cook, that's what he was telling Wilby at the beginning of the movie. It was just like, sometimes you have to, it's hard to say what will get rid of this hex. You need a knife, or you need to save somebody's life, or so on and so forth. So that's why I kind of figured they just felt like his big, finding the spies or whatever it was is the way to do it. Yeah. Can we agree that Buzz was a horrible human being but had a great car?
The jalopy? Yes. I was wondering how that thing kept running, honestly, because it had to have been just broken down every take that it was done.
When the dog was driving the car, and for those who haven't seen the movie, first of all, shame on you. Secondly, yes, the dog does drive the car, no spoilers here. It happens. That was actually, I feel like, fairly believable effects when the dog was driving the car and you saw it from the side. Do you disagree?
No, I agree completely. And I think that has to do with the fact that, especially in that era of filmmaking, practical effects was the way to go. And so if you wanted to do something on screen and make it look good, you really had to put effort into making it look good. I mean, I'm sure all it was just some guy either in the back with an additional steering wheel or underneath where all the action was taken and he was the one steering it. It's just amazing what they're able to accomplish and hide from the audience when they're filming this stuff.
Yeah, I think the green screen ish thing still gets me with like them, you know, doing this with the car and the fake background that happens in a lot of Disney movies. But when you see him driving by, I'm buying the whole thing. It's a dog driving by in that car, and that was kind of cool. Also, let's talk about the stereotype that Fred MacMurray serves as a mailman, and his basic stereotype is that he is afraid of dogs or hates dogs because he is a mailman. You know, obviously he turns around for him at the end, but I just thought that was too on the nose. Maybe it's kind of like there's always like the dog catcher in a lot of these movies, and he's the villain. In this one, it's like the mailman being chased by the dog. That just seems like, I don't know. It just seems a little too on the nose, maybe.
I think that added to the conflict, honestly. Because the main conflict is between MacMurray and Wilby, the dad and the son. You know, one's turning into a dog. The guy doesn't like dogs. The dad doesn't like dogs. The dad has to have a reason why he doesn't like dogs. Well, what was it? What's family friendly enough for Disney to put on screen for that? Yeah. Did he get mauled by a dog when he was a kid? That's not going to be a thing for sure. Or is it just the easy trope of mailmans don't like dogs, so we're going to make him a mailman?
Yeah, I guess that makes sense.
You have to have that behind this. You have to have some kind of backstory for the character for a reason why he doesn't like the dog. And I don't know how many choices Disney would really have into building that kind of backstory.
Mauled by a dog wouldn't have flown in the 50s?
Right.
Okay, gotcha. Just making sure.
Well, I mean, I'm sure it would have flown, but in a Disney movie, a G-rated movie that's going to be a family-friendly thing, like all of a sudden Fred MacMurray's, you know, flashing back to his childhood when he's 12 years old being mauled or something like that. I don't know if that's going to work for him. I think it really was just a way for the writers to get that like conflict going.
He did also sort of play the stereotypical clueless dad.
Yes.
You know, and that was one of the things too. Like, I think that if I had set off a rocket or a missile in my house and blown up the second and third floors of the house, that I would probably be in some pretty bad trouble. And I don't think that my dad would have taken it as calmly. But again, overall, he seems a little clueless, right?
Oh, well, not just clueless, but I think like checked out. He doesn't really care about the kids all that much. I mean, he's mostly concerned about if there's a dog anywhere or what's in the paper. That's all you really see him doing is just reading that. I mean, there's a scene where I think it's Moochie, I believe, where Mooch is trying to talk to him and all that stuff, and he's not even paying attention to anything at all, even though Wilby's turning into the dog and everything around him. You know, it is that sort of default 50s dad character of like just he's there, he's in charge, but don't expect him to do too much.
Okay, so one thing when he's kind of overcoming that and he's going ahead and he's accepting the information that Moochie and Wilby have given him and he's going to the police about it, the police take him, of course, they think he's crazy and they take him to a psychiatrist down the hall, which I guess they just happen to have one in the building. I don't know how that works.
Different budgets.
Yeah, exactly. It was a different time. They had money for psychiatrists. It was a thing. But what threw me was the psychiatrist's voice immediately struck me. And I was like, well, wait a minute. That sounds super familiar. And my wife was like, oh, that's the guy from the Haunted Mansion. I was like, no, that's not Paul Frees. But obviously I'm thinking later Paul Frees because that's who it is. It's Paul Frees who is there. And it is amazing. I just like rewound and like listened to his voice over and over again because he was the voice of the ghost host in the Haunted Mansion. He's the voice in the Pirates of the Caribbean. He was Burgermeister Meisterburger in the Rankin and Bass Santa Claus is Coming to Town. Paul Frees was a legend, and so it was just really neat to see him in this role in this movie as a psychiatrist, and it was just, I don't know, it kind of blew me away.
No, that's definitely one of the reasons why I liked going back to these older movies, because in a lot of these things, these actors are either just getting their start or in the middle of, you know, their careers doing stuff that was long before what you even may have known them for. Which is, it's just kind of a cool, like, look into, they were just living their life trying to get, you know, on screen as much as possible, too.
Yeah, true. So, you know, this movie is kind of unique in a lot of ways, but it's, again, back in the 50s, and, you know, Wilby's making this, like, missile launcher rocket. They're talking about secret spy stuff. What did that bring up for you?
It reminded me too. It brought me back to the fact that this is really a snapshot of America at its time, or at least what the culture kind of felt like for a lot of people. Wherein like it's the Cold War, everybody's worried about spies and what Russia might be up to. There's a space race going on. I mean, the kid is trying to build a rocket in his basement, which I didn't understand, just for the fact that usually when you build a rocket, you want to put it outside somewhere in case it does blow up somebody's house.
That's not as funny, though.
That's true. You're right. We got to think of those things. But it did strike me, just looking back at it, and kind of like everybody with an accent is a spy kind of idea, which is kind of funny to me, honestly.
Yeah. Well, and the guy who is the bad guy in this movie, his daughter Francesca, is just, she's the new hot French girl that moves into town. It seems like the dad turns on her pretty quickly and easily.
He does.
To his fair Francesca, and all of a sudden he's like talking to his cohort, going, should we kill her now? No, well, we won't kill her now. It's just like.
Well, that was his stepdaughter, so I guess that's a not as close as what you would think. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know, man. That was pretty tough. But I think also we have to pay tribute to the dog who played in this, because the dog did an amazing job, I think. It was really hard to tell sometimes what was the practical effect and what was the dog, and I think they did a fairly good job doing it. Sometimes it looked a little unnatural, but I think for the most part, for an animal actor, I thought it was great. And as a matter of fact, I feel like, and you tell me if I'm wrong on this, when he was trying to get out of the basement, the dog is going up the boxes. It looks like that's actually the dog going up the boxes and out the window. And again, I don't know that you could do that today if that's the case, but it looks like the actual dog doing that, and then all the stuff falls down behind him. So
it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, they had a lot of animals that were very, very talented like that, and they had them wrangled and trained and all that stuff. What always made me laugh is the attempts to make the dog speak when it's Wilby speaking.
Yeah.
'Cause it's not like it's the peanut butter on the gums kind of thing. It's a one move of the mouth, and then the camera kind of rewinds to make the mouth move like it's moving, which is awkward, but I mean, what are you going to do?
Are you telling me the dog wasn't really talking?
No, I'm afraid not.
Come on, Rick.
Spoiler alert.
That's horrible. I'm gonna try to put that out of my head, because that's, again, goes back to suspension of disbelief.
Right, of course.
So, with all that we've talked about, the cast, the era, everything about this movie, Rick, tell me, would you recommend this movie?
I think you have to. I would watch it again. I mean, this is my movie that I watched in my childhood. I think anybody that watches it today should watch it with a critical eye of like, yeah, this is definitely a different time, a different era. It's not going to be as like exciting as some movies might be for some. But if you got a kid who's like 5 to 7, loves dogs, it's probably great, honestly.
Okay. So I'm going to say something that I often say in these movies, that I think if you're a huge fan of Disney history, that this is an important movie, because it has Fred MacMurray and Tommy Kirk and Kevin Corcoran, and, as you mentioned, Annette Funicello. So it has a lot of Disney royalty in this movie, and at the same time, it was the beginning of what became sort of a franchise for them with the Shaggy Dog. I would not be surprised if they try in some way to like bring this back again, especially with the ability on Disney Plus to do original content made specifically for the channel. So, I mean, I think if you're a Disney fan that you watch this, I think if you're a fan of animals that you could watch this. But I definitely think that it is probably one that that actually will hold up as a family movie. There are some that feel like they don't. I think the Computer Wore Tennis Shoes is just a little too campy. I think you really have to watch that when you're, I don't know, kind of doing like a Mystery Science Theater 3000 thing with it and just joking around with it. But I think this one has enough moments with it that it is very watchable. And it's an easy watch too. So I would recommend it. And I think you got to do the follow up. You got to watch the Dean Jones, Suzanne Plachette, the Shaggy DA that came out, I think, 11 years after this. So. Let us know what you think in the comments below, or hit us up at Deep in the Plus on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And Rick, thanks for reviewing this movie with me. I appreciate it.
Happy to. My pleasure.
All right, Rick, so you know how this works. You also got to give me a pick of the week. What is your pick on Disney Plus that you want to talk about?
My pick is actually something I'm very passionate about. I know this isn't exactly maybe what you've been looking for and would normally get, But my pick now is The Simpsons, and the fact that they are in glorious 4x3 once again on Disney+. For those that don't know, when The Simpsons originally debuted on Disney+, the formatting of all the, especially the early seasons, were all in 16:9. That had the unfortunate side effect of cutting off a lot of jokes, because when animators doing their thing, especially when they were animating in the 90s and 4x3 was the standard, they would use the full box that they had available. So some jokes, when they got transferred over to Disney Plus, were cut off. One of them that is particularly notable is when Homer and everybody goes to the Duff Factory to tour the Duff Factory, and you see a big pipe that's going into 3 different types of Duff, that it says is 3 different types of beer, but of course it's just the one type. And you miss out on a lot of stuff like that. It wasn't just that episode. It was a lot of different episodes that just kind of lost some of their jokes in the transfer. But fortunately, that's all done now. We're back to 4x3, and all of our glorious Simpson jokes are back. That was my pick of the week, and I appreciate you letting me rant and rave about that one.
No, for sure, man. Because I haven't gone back to look at them, and I knew this was happening, but because I haven't gone back to look at them, do they also offer you the 16:9, or is it only 4x3 now?
It doesn't show on my selection. I know FX used to give you the option for that. All I've seen is just the episode as it is, so 4x3 is what I'm seeing.
You're like, that's all that really matters. Like, why would
that's all I'm looking for, man. I don't know what that's what I wanted to see.
Why would you need to see anything else, right? Very cool. So my recommendation would be one that is not so deep, so I'm going to make it as my pick of the week, which would be Artemis Fowl. Artemis Fowl just dropped on June 12th, and it was originally meant for the theaters. It was supposed to be a summer release, and because of COVID-19, if you haven't heard of it, kids, look it up. They canceled all these movies, and some of them they've moved, like Mulan has moved, and the new X-Men New Mutants movie has been moved, but for Artemis Fowl, they decided to drop it on Disney Plus, which I think is brilliant. And here's why, is that I don't think it was going to be a huge box office hit, and I think they kind of knew that. I think that I was hearing a lot of buzz from people who were saying this is going to be a train wreck, and I don't know where they got their information or why, especially because the Artemis Fowl books are very popular, and is something that everybody that I've heard who loves books has talked about, especially for kind of children's books. So it was surprising to me that people were already kind of hating on this movie. I never read the books anyway, but when it dropped, one of our reviewers actually for our website said, get ready to be disappointed. So I was ready to be disappointed, and I watched it and I wasn't disappointed. I thought it was pretty neat. It had a very cool vibe to it that was kind of a little bit Spy Kids meets Lemony Snicket kind of a thing. So it was in that kind of edgy children's entertainment type of a thing that I think that Disney is probably lacking these days. So we watched as a family. I enjoyed it. It has Colin Farrell in it, who plays like Artemis, like senior. And then it has Josh Gad in it, who is kind of the sort of main character narrator of the whole story. So I think that it worked, and it kind of left us wanting more. So I hope that they come back to this and maybe do a sequel that will also be on Disney Plus, just like sort of the Percy Jackson thing, where they're going to have a series. Maybe they won't do a series, but maybe another movie might be cool. I assume they have analytics to tell them whether this was a hit or a miss with most people. It was directed by Kenneth Branagh, so I think again that's kind of a plus for this movie. But even though I think some people have panned it, I would have been disappointed, I think, in seeing it in the movie theater, but I was pleasantly surprised to be able to find it on Disney Plus for free, and I definitely would recommend it. So, if there's anything that you want to say about the picks we've done or the movie we've done, again, make sure to leave us a comment. But again, Rick, thank you so much for doing this with me, taking the time.
Happy to.
If you like what you're watching, make sure you like and subscribe. You can also find us on social at Deep in the Plus on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And if you're a Disney Parks fan, don't forget to catch me and Rob on Park Center Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. on WDWNT.com.